I'm going to stop talking now. You have an hour to just take your time. And I know she said not going to take me an hour, but I've given her that much time. Of course, if we finish early, we'll just log off and continue to enjoy our Sunday, right? But I wanted to make sure that it may not take her an hour to present, but we have an active academic group. And so I'm expecting questions. And this is maybe only about a third of the people, but we're going to keep moving forward. So
it should take 3 hours, but we will see. I would appreciate participation. I kind of want to know who's in here. Laura, is that Laura that I know? Malia, so good to see you here, even though I can't see you. Thank you everybody for coming in today. My name is Kia Jessica Carr, K-I-A, last name is Ruiz. I'm talking to you from my shop in Westminster. This is Bodie Bridge. The concept of my shop is earth care and self-care. So I have a 19 by 26 yoga studio on the other side of this wall. I put in a second bathroom. I can use it as an event space for whatever I want. I'm the boss. In the front, I have retail here. I have a couch. Yesterday, I had a hydration lab where I dealt with anxiety. So there's so much anxiety right now that all I did is I had people come in and we made tea. And I don't sell tea here. So it was 2 teas from my homestead farm. I have a 1/3 of an acre homestead farm yard in New Reed. And we made 2 teas from that and then 1 tea that I get in bulk from natural grocers. And then we just talked about anxiety and what these teas and the contraindications are. So we just have chairs and everything set up. And then I use the space here for environmental consulting. So it's a self-care, earth care. I also know a lot of permaculturists. I have a permaculturist design course certificate, and I did the landscape design class. So I help connect folks with like putting in rain barrels, helping folks get worms. So I like joke, you can take a yoga class and get a couple worms to go. But yeah, it's a lot of different things, including herbalism. So my background, and I know it's like already feeling like I'm talking about myself way too much, but this is what you asked for. So my background, I'm a biologist. I have my bachelor's in wildlife management. I got to the candidacy phase of a PhD in biology. And then I had a car accident, but I was in a herpetology lab. And I was looking at the environmental influences on tadpole morphology, or how little frogs grow. And I worked with a lot of agricultural adjacent like plots. In that course of how I was doing my research and I was professional, I did a lot of backcountry research. So when I was finishing my undergrad, I worked with the Forest Service in Oregon, and I did my undergrad at Humboldt in the Redwoods in Northern California. And my ranger like thought he'd put me in my place and made me go out and fight fire. And it was like, oh, we're going to get this really nerdy person to go fight fire, and we're going to teach her to not ask questions and basically get uppity and outside my station of the biologist with the things I was requesting. Little did he know that I had a lot of trail experience because I did AmeriCorps in Montana. So I was already certified on using a chainsaw, using a Pulaski, dealing with some pretty serious, like, you know, stuff out there. So he ended up putting me on this trail crew, and I crushed it. And so much so that the fire crew got dispatched later that summer, the first year that I was there. And they were like, can we take Kia with us? And then I ended up doing like little heli-tac work, like jumping out of helicopters onto fire. And just basically when you're young enough and you're able-bodied with the Forest Service and it's fire season, all hands on deck. This was like 20 years ago. And wildfires were a lot safer then than they are now. And what was so weird about that experience is that I then went more into research, and I left operations with how you run the Forest Service. And I was applying for all these research positions, like in Montana and with different labs and stuff. And everybody was so geeked out, not only that I cared about frogs, but because of my fire experience. So I became a pretty well-known like backcountry researcher, and I had my pick of any job that I wanted. And that would mean that like I would backpack all over Montana, looking at how tadpoles came back after fires. I backpacked all over Yosemite in Northern California, looking at amphibian diseases and environmental drift. Like I've done a lot of different backcountry research, including down in Central America. And it was the firefighting experience that made everybody want to go out there. So you can't see it here, but I'm only 5'2.5". I'm really short. So here I am in the middle of nowhere and carrying a lot of equipment. Like I did this one looking at how amphibians were coming back according to the historic record in this one area in Northern California for 1 year. And it was a lot of equipment because our funding was through Fish and Wildlife, and they wanted us to look at the fish as well. That's how we got our funding. So we'd take out these gill nets that weighed 40 pounds. And then we have to bring out computers, and we have to bring out all this other stuff. And when you start putting that onto my small body, I don't have a lot of room to bring food. I don't have a lot of room to bring things when I'm out for 3 weeks at a time. And if I got stuck. And so luckily with some of my botany classes with my coursework, I started paying attention to the plants, because I couldn't really pack Pepto-Bismol. I couldn't really pack like Neosporin. I didn't have enough capacity to pack those things. So that's how I started working with plants. It was basically, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I may not be able to get somewhere. Like I have been hurt outside before, and I know what happens when you just kind of get stuck there. And like I messed up my knee and I had to put it like an ice melt to Montana until I can make it back to a hospital. So I started working with plants and really paying attention to who was around if I needed it for self-rescue. So long story, that's how I kind of got into working with plants. So we're fast forwarding 20 years, and here I am now, and I'm in Colorado. And there was a group that wanted to do ancestral herbalism. And it was essentially a lot of Black and brown women. And they were really upset because in Colorado, you actually don't need an herbalism certificate to be a practicing herbalist. This is something a lot of people don't know, but you're seeing schools everywhere, especially since the pandemic. You can get certified for anything for like $5 if you give somebody your credit card at this point, right? I mean, let's be real about that. And it was this group of folks in 2016, and they were like, I joined this course like in Boulder or in Denver. And when it came down to it, and this is the first principle we're going to get to about plants, they would go out with these teachers. They're getting a lot of information. They're getting a lot of knowledge in the stuff we're going to cover today. And they would go places, and it would be like, just pick. And here's some fresh calendula I just took from my garden a little while ago. And people were getting really offended because people were not making offerings with plants. People were not in relationship with the plants. And like folks were just kind of noticing across the board, this is not the way herbalism should be. This is not how we should do stuff. So as a group of Black and brown people that were like, let's do our own class, our own certificate, and let's basically re-indigenize the space, not make it as formal as it is like paying $3,000 or $4,000 for these herbalism programs. So I got wind of this, and they reached out to me because like in my journey, I did go to grad school. I taught human bio, marine bio, and like, you know, the big lecture halls and whatnot. So I do have a formal training and certification in pedagogy and how to create the way we learn as adults if you're in college or some other course. So I'm like, sure, let's do this. So I had folks like brain dump all the things that they wanted. I put out a year-long curriculum, and that way people were able to figure out getting somebody in November if they want to do this particular topic or this topic. And then I ended up teaching the basic biology and botany classes. And so the first class that I would teach was basically a botany class. So Sister Ote, here comes the first book. You probably already have it queued up. Botany in a Day. It's Botany in a Day by Elpel, E-L-P-E-L, Thomas Elpel. So I love this book because there's a whole thing of like, you know, people can say, just meet the plant, pray to the plant, XYZ with the plant. I really like combining the two. So I'm going to pause there for a brief moment as you're looking up that book. And actually just kind of pausing everybody to kind of just have those 2 feet on the ground, because yeah, I've already had 10 minutes. An hour is not that long. So put your feet down on the ground. And I am a yoga teacher. I've been a yoga teacher for 15 years. It balances my right side and left side brain, or else I sound like a computer with statistics and numbers. I can get really weird. So yeah, put both feet on the ground, kind of get your little sit bones in there if you can. Roll the shoulders back 2 times. Roll the shoulders forward 2 times. And then we're going to do half neck circles, front half, ear to shoulder, ear to shoulder, ear to shoulder. Come back, pause, chin parallel with the ground, close the eyes, and just pause in your breath right now. I'm going to slow down my voice. I'm going to slow down the way that you're listening, and I'm going to start putting some intention into this. So like I would do an intention with the plant of like, you know, hello, I'm Kia. It's so nice to meet you. This is a thing that I'm really hoping harvesting you can do for me. That's how I would kind of react with the plant. And this is what I can do for you if I do an offering or if I just take care of the plant. With you right now, I want you to kind of think of your intention for this class. You've been rolling with Sister Ote for a while. You have an idea of the medicine and the information she's procuring. Her and I have very similar ideas of how the things that we learn that help people, we want it to radiate out. So this flower that we're dealing with today, Calendula officinalis, this is your cohort's name. This is the gentle flower. We're going to get into the properties, but this is beautiful, deep medicine. This is calming. This works with inflammation. This works when things get really frenzied around us, or our skin, or internally. We go to this medicine to come back to our nervous system, to come back to our actual baseline. So come back to your baseline right now and just kind of think of, what do I want from this class? What do I want from this intention? What do I want from this medicine? Because you will all leave here with the ability to do something with this medicine. And yeah, this is the gratitude of how we work with each other in these spaces, and we radiate out in love and in compassion with those that we care about. So still with the grounded feet, close however you want to close. I do the hands together, and you can open your eyes. I'm actually going to have you do one more. So pinkies together, thumbs together, hands like this. Open it up into a circle. Boom, look at that. It's like an aster. It's like the flower, but this becomes a lotus flower, and you can just pour that intention into there. It's like a beautiful way to kind of bring meditation and plants together. So bring the hands together, put it down. So yeah, botany in a day. This is your introduction to plants. And if you haven't already done it, like raise your hand or put in the chat if you've already worked with this book. I'm kind of curious. Okay. So botany in a day, it's going to go very simply into the families, and Sister Otay does love the families. When you go to the first page, it is a diagram of what a flower looks like. It's very simple diagramming, and you can make your diagrams as goofy as you want. You can make them as intricate as you want, but you want to start paying attention to things like, okay, single stem. All right, this one flower comes off the stem. Wait, is that one flower or is that many flowers? When you start going off of a disc, you start learning about different families and how they kind of relate. And this worked with me with backpacking and how plants help me, because I would be able to recognize traits from families and be all like, oh, it's a mint. The mint's going to have a volatile oil. The volatile oil could be good for like upset stomach. If I got that out there. If I see something like this, I'm like, ooh, it could have a pretty cool calming effect for me in the aster family. Only thing with this one is that there's this term called contraindications, and contraindications, put that word in there, if that helps out. Contraindications is basically like when things don't work the way that we want them to. So we're working with plants in a healing way, and we're thinking that, yay, I'm going to give this plant to somebody in some way, they're going to be healed. Now, if this person has a particular sickness, or they're taking a particular medication and that plant doesn't quite work well with whatever that illness is, or that medication, or something else that they're taking in their body, and it has an adverse effect, instead of healing, you kind of get more disease, that's a contraindication. So if you're doing anything with plants, like I like combining Eastern and Western, or like, you know, more systemic medicine. Hopefully everybody has like a regular primary care physician. You still want to like work with whoever your healthcare team is, and you want to work with plants kind of like to complement that. That is just something, my background as a biologist, ecologist, I'm not a physician though. With herbalism though, like I can work with people, but I tell people the extent of where I work. So I always say still work with your PCP. So with a calendula and the asters, they're generally considered safe. So calendula is considered safe, GRAS. So generally revered as safe. And with that, there are a couple of things like with pregnancy and breastfeeding, it's not generally said you should take calendula only because it hasn't been studied. So there are a couple of things where it hasn't been studied. The only serious thing I can see is like if people are allergic to ragweed or other asters, and this family is Asteraceae or Compositae. If you're allergic to some of these plants and the way they're out in the ecosystem, then you might be all like, ooh, I don't know about that. So I know I get ragweed issues when that kind of pops up, and I can like feel it on sneezing, but I don't get anything super serious like I have to run inside. For me, when I'm around alfalfa and hayseed, that really gets bad for me and I start having hives. So for like those kind of grasses, I will stay away from that. But for ragweed, I generally feel safe with this. So I'm going to go back to my botany in a day, and you've seen the beautiful illustrations there. And it's simple. You just kind of go into the index table of contents. And I thought it was on page 143. But there are two books that I rely on, and I'm going to show you these two books. There we go. Asteraceae, Aster, Sunflower Family. And so like, you know, this is where we're kind of dealing with the disc and all the rays that come off. And that is what happens with a lot of these plants. And it's just like this one little, I'm going to pull my fresh flower off. It looks like one flower with so many like simple petals on it, right? What happens is that center part is called my ray or my disc ray. And all these individual flowers or these petals, they're actually flowers. So if you have one of these with you, go ahead and start taking it apart. And it's just very simple that each of these is a flower. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of flowers in that one little thing. And then we have so many of these that are really growing right now that it's just really kind of helpful to know this whole thing is not a flower. But when you're picking it, I took a couple of kids out to go picking recently for this class, and we ended up with this bowl here, which was really cool to get ready for everybody. Everything was really sticky. So, you know, a good healthy plant, in this case, what we're doing is we're working with the oils that are coming off the plant. Malia, I saw that you harvested some of your calendula online. Can you put in the chat, was it sticky for you? Was it sticky all throughout the stem? Was it sticky in the green parts at the base of the flower? Like, that is all good medicine. It's kind of like, ew, if you're not wearing gloves or anything, but you're basically getting those beautiful oils on you and you can just kind of like rub it on you. So that's one way you can start working with it. If I want to make this the easiest, I'm going to use a carrier oil. So I'm going to start going into the herbalism of this now. And I guess I should do one more introduction about myself. So my name is Kia. I come from Los Angeles. My family, my father's Agavi Buble from Panama. So that's the indigenous tribe there. And like I would say Nantorome for my people, it's they speak Chicham, and it's that line of languages that runs from Colombia to like southern Mexico, the Jaguar people. So if you ever hear people talk about Jaguar people, that's my dad's people. And then my mom, she is Black in 5 tribes ancestry. So the 5 tribes, if you know about that in the Southeast and how that intermixes with being Black and how people register or don't register, like an Afro-Indigenous history of the United States is a great book to kind of go over that, or chapter 5 of Project 1619. But the other book that I'm going to show you right now is we're talking about herbalism, but you're drying it out. Are you drying out the whole flower, or are you just drying out the flower head? I'm looking at the chat right now. The head, perfect. So yours looks just like this. Okay, so I'm talking to Leah right now, and yeah, she said, I asked if it was sticky. She doesn't remember. She said she was drying it out. I asked what she's drying out. She's drying out the flower head. And so we'll show you how I dried out my flower heads. I have this great seed like tower here. So whenever I want to dry anything out or I want to start harvesting my seeds, I just throw them in there and I have it tiered. It's very contained, and boom. And I have very, very high ceilings here. And then I also have like some easterly facing 6x6 windows with ledges on them. So like the other day I was working with California poppy and I just took all the pods, I put them on the windowsill, let them dry, boom, they've exploded open. Guess what I have now? I have a bunch of California poppy seeds ready to go into an envelope. So there are a lot of techniques for how we're drying stuff. So if you don't have this, I'm going to go to the first one. Okay, the book. Here you go, Sister Ote. The Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook, a home manual. And this one is by James Green, the male herbal. Anyway, in my lineage of really, okay. Hoping that was loud. Good to see you. So in my lineage of kind of like doing this, I mentioned all the herbalists that I was working with that were just like, oh, we got to like re-indigenize how we're working with plants here. I did that, but in my own background, I chose to have 2 kids with a home birth as statistics were coming out very scary about Black women and actually surviving. So I went with a home birth midwife, direct entry midwife. When I moved to Denver, she's like, you need to be working with Shelley Torgrove. So if any of you have been to Apothecary Pintura, I don't know if that sounds familiar, on 6, she started that shop. And then with the divorce and everything, she left that to her partner, and then she opened up Artemisia and Rue, and that's what she's been operating since then. And her lineage, she trained with Mayans, and she's actually moving to Mexico now that her daughter is graduating from high school, which is a beautiful story. So she's leaving a lot of us here in the Denver area to really kind of push on her information. And yeah, I started going to some of her women's circles and some of her like practicing groups. And she was like, you basically have to get your formulas replicated. You have to, if you're making medicine for people that's radiating out, you have to make the same exact medicine as much as you can each time somebody comes to you, so that they're very reliable of what they're going to be experiencing. So this is like the big textbook. And then I did the workshops with her about like, this is when you start getting really precise. In herbalism, you have a couple of different like stereotypes, I guess. You have the kitchen witch, and I know witch, it's like, oh, you know, but it's like women with wisdom, okay? So you have the ones that are just like, oh, I'm going to take this plant, I'm going to put it into a jar, I'm going to put whatever it is I'm doing on it with my menstruum, and then I'm going to wait however long that I wait. You know, I mean, typically people do stuff by moon cycles, just because it pulls on water in a very kind of like, I guess a way that you can kind of conceive of it beforehand, a predictable way. And then you have folks that are like being very precise with how much weight of what is going into a container, how much volume of a menstruum is going into a container, exactly how much am I waiting here, and I still do it by moon cycles too. But this is a book to help you get into precision. So if I'm just going to be super simple and I'm out and I'm with my kids and I have a lot of calendula, and where I am, like it was super wet. I'm in the Northwest Denver area in Arvada for my farm. It was super wet. And before we hit 100 degrees last week, that calendula was popping. It was looking beautiful. Those rays were like, they were thick, right? And 100 degrees, what happened? Drying out. Those seeds are starting to show, like the plant is adjusting to what it has to do in the atmosphere. So if you still have really wet calendula, awesome. If it's drying out, that's totally fine too. Just start harvesting those seeds because people will want calendula seeds. So for just my very basic stuff, if I had like a whole mason jar of like fresh calendula, I would just take off the heads. So right there, I would just snip that there. So I still have that green part. Some people do flowers only. I think the heads are really sticky, so I do the whole head too. And then just bloop, mason jar magic, right? I would start getting these ready and just pop them in there. And then like an easy way to access this, super easy, that just feels really luscious on your skin if you just want to take care of yourself, or if you're dealing with any sort of like wound care or eczema or skin condition, I would fill this all the way up. And then I would put on a carrier oil. Carrier oils are gonna like not necessarily carry any sort of medicinal traits. They're gonna help the medicine make contact with whatever you're doing with the skin. So a very easy one, because this is a Mediterranean herb, Mediterranean olive oil. So I go with food grade stuff as much as I can, because basically if I can eat it, I know it's gonna be good for my skin. And we also have the idea of permeability in our skin. So basically what you put on your skin eventually gets into your bloodstream. A good example of this is like babies that have that new skin that haven't really, you know, toughened up to the world. 50% of what you put on a baby's skin before they're 6 months old goes into their bloodstream. That's why we don't put sunblock on baby or a lot of topical things. You just have a shade over them, just because so much of their environment is going directly into their skin. As like basically on our skin layer, we do have a lot of bacteria. We have a lot of ways that our immune system is already interacting with the environment. They just haven't been in the environment long enough to develop that kind of immune system. So that's why I still do food grade. Pregnant women are more susceptible to that too. So food grade products, if you're doing anything topically, or like, you know, with your shampoos, just really kind of watch like the phthalates and the different chemicals that you're using, because this stuff is permeable in different stages of our life, more so. So pregnant women, just really be conscious of like, you know, what kind of products you're putting on your body or you're surrounding yourself with. The best carrier oils for essential oils. Who put that down? The best carrier oils for essential. So it depends on what you're using the essential oil for. So if I'm just going straight on my skin, olive oil is going to be great. If you're doing something with your face though, this is going to be too thick. So like if you're really kind of playing around for something on your face or a little more sensitive parts of your body, grapeseed oil is going to be a lighter oil. Now, if you want to go for a heavy oil, castor oil is typically where you would use if you're doing like one of those packs. If you're doing like a castor oil pack where you have your herbs and some sort of oil, you're putting it into flannel. I do flannel, and then put that on the skin and then put a heating pad on it, and that helps absorb. So that's something that I personally do with like a dandelion heads to really help like get things moving if they're super stuck. Like if that, I would do that if I was working with somebody that had something going on in their pelvic or their reproductive like area. And that's like just the strength of how the viscosity of these oils. So grapeseed, super light, olive oil is going to be a little heavier, castor oil is going to be our heaviest, if that kind of helps you out there. And then you can also get like avocado oil is fine. What did I bring today? I brought coconut oil. I know we have a lot of people that love coconut oil around here. I definitely play with cocoa butter. I play with shea butter, and these are all oils too. And I know like when I do classes with teenagers and, you know, we're all kind of like talking, that's where I will use some essential oils, and I'll basically do a combination of coconut oil and shea or cocoa butter. And instead of like putting it into a mixture to make like whipped butter, we'll just like hang out like this online, and we'll just like squeeze the different oils like in a little plastic bag. And that's one way of kind of incorporating it. So I'm gonna pause there for a moment, and I'm gonna go into the Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook. So let me go back here to the index. And I'm going to read it out to you because there are going to be some words here and you're going to be like, what? We can just stop right there, but we're not going to stop there. So yeah, this is me being like all sort of scholarly, just making sure I'm getting it from the official text. Calendula, and it's only one paragraph, it's not a whole page, okay? Calendula, marigold, it's known as common pot marigold, is anti-inflammatory, vulnerary. Do we know what that word is? It's like vulnerability, so you're dealing with wounds. Lymphatic, moving stuff through how waste products go through our system. And antimicrobial and antifungal. All this is from calendula, okay? I'll write these words down for you too in a moment. It is unsurpassed for treating local skin problems that are due to infection and for treating wounds, burns, bruises, or strains due to physical damage. It is excellent for internal digestive inflammation and ulceration. Calendula is antispasmodic, lymphatic, and an emmenagogue for normalizing the menstrual process. And cholagogue for aiding in the relief of a gallbladder problem and its accompanying digestive complaints, hepatic. That's a lot, right? So let me get some of these words down for you. And this is the thing, when you start getting into these texts, and you do want to pick out like a referencing text, okay? Because it doesn't matter how cool you think you are, you do need this stuff. And sometimes you're just cruising around thinking that you're doing the most, and you will start getting away from your formulas. You start getting away from your training. And it's really good to stay humble in this process because the plant can change a little bit depending on what's happening in the season. And as we've seen with climate chaos here in the Denver area, I'm assuming that's where most of you are, like, we're getting a lot of changes with the timing. Sister Ote's heard me talk about phenology a lot. But like a simple thing right now, linden trees. I have a huge linden tree shading like the eastern side of my farm. And I usually have that out there and it's like the bees are just like cruising along and the bees get it for a couple of weeks. And then I still have like some white flowers that I'll then harvest for like different medicines that I'm using. This year, my white flowers bloomed last Saturday. And then we had 100 degrees on Monday and they were fried by Monday. The bees got those flowers for like 3 days. I didn't even get to touch them. So I'm pulling bracts off for like teas and medicines right now. But yeah, no, everything kind of just went super fast. And it's good to go back to your text when you're just like, this didn't happen the way that I thought it would happen. Just so you can kind of have that baseline away from your own bias as you're kind of like, okay, that did happen that way, or this does do that. And it's just good to kind of like basically have that extra resource as you're figuring out like what you're doing with your medicine. I'm gonna go. one more. All right. So this book is amazing because I then go into the back. And yes, my mentor was like, make sure you use the heck out of this thing. I'm going to get it really close to here. Let's see. Maybe you can read that. It gives me like basically what do I want to do with it with certain like illnesses, actions, indications, like what I can do with, yeah, CHSS, drying, extraction, harvesting, production, salves. So it gives me my whole formula, and I'm going to go to salve because that's the one that everybody seems to love so much. Before we get to salve though, like they're going to tell me to extract this into an oil. And what they're going to do is they're going to do an ethyl oil salve. I'm going to make it a lot easier. So they have this whole recipe right here on the ethyl oil salve. And what they're going to say to do is they're going to be like, dry out your plant. Once the plant is dry, you want to have it dry because if you have water moisture going in the oil, yeah, you have chance of spoilage, and we don't want to introduce that in here for bacteria to take form and everything. So they say dry it out, and then they want you to extract it briefly with alcohol so that you're getting all the medicine out. You can do that process, or you can very simply, I'm not going to weigh it right now, but you could weigh it. See this? I'm just going to start packing. Right. And this is going to go more towards the kitchen witch method. And trust me, my spouse will not be upset because my spouse has like a lot of skin issues. It's a lot going on with autoimmune stuff. His dad was in Vietnam and sprayed with Agent Orange, and his unit still gets together regularly. All the kids of this unit that survived. A lot of them actually didn't survive. They have a lot of autoimmune stuff in their skin and the way they're dealing with food reactivities. So we actually go through a lot of calendula for my spouse. So for this, I'm just going to pack it pretty tightly, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you dry those? I mean, did you rinse those or wash them before you set them to dry?
I did not. Yeah, don't spray it in my place. I did shake them off. I did check them for bugs, but no, I wasn't trying to lose anything. I just put it all up in there. I basically went through all of them individually, making sure there were no bugs. But yeah, the kids that I was with, they had very strict instructions on how we pick. We picked stuff, went straight into a basket, nothing touched the ground. And then like these, I'm this person. I'm this person running around with baskets like this. I have a new fishing basket that I love because it goes over one shoulder. And then I also have a huge backpack, trapper's basket. If I'm doing like a lot of harvesting and I'm out hiking, that I can just take stuff off with tongue and just drop it right into my basket. So my basket's kind of become my first place that I'm doing my harvesting, just that it's going in some place where there's some air circulation. And then I just kind of get it ready for when it's going to that drying rack. If you don't have that kind of rack and you do want to dry, and you want to use air drying, I recommend putting things like on a screen. And if you've probably seen people like with dried tomatoes, if you've seen it from Italy, they have a screen, the tomatoes go on it, it's at an angle, probably like 30 degrees. And that way air circulates underneath, the sun's hitting it directly, they dry really fast. If you're drying this kind of stuff at home, I would say like, get a place where you're not going to get a lot of sunlight exposure. A lot of our plants, we don't want them hitting direct sun. From the process of drying, if we don't have to, we're going to have it there for quite a while, all the way to when we bottle a tincture or whatever. That's why we have so many brown bottles when we do that, because denature is essentially what's happening with the medicine. So what I would do is I would get a screen, and I'd probably find like a ledge, or like if you have a nice sort of airflow going through a closet, I would set the screen up on something. So like maybe like 2 bricks, however you need to. And that way airflow can go under, airflow can go on top. You can agitate it a little bit. Same exact thing with seeds. You do want to make sure the product is clean, doesn't have any extra gook on it. In this case, like if I did rinse it, I would want to have that drying really well and lay it in one layer just to make sure it's not getting melty. Let's see. Does that help out? But yeah, you can wash them. I just chose not to, just because I know my source and I was doing the picking and I just really did not want to lose anything. Another reason that I don't do that is that their environmental sort of interactions with things, like one that I don't wash that kind of freaks people out is OSHA. If you work with OSHA root, it's a root that the Nunchi use up in the mountains, and it is one of our most powerful medicines. It is an endangered medicine, and I work with somebody out of New Mexico that has artificially seeded fields, and I'm actually artificially seeding fields like not too far from us. And we can't grow it when we get down to like this area here. It grows 8,500 feet plus. And there are all these factors that nobody can really figure out. So I just know people artificially seeding in places where it already grows because we haven't figured out the special sauce of what are all the variables that makes it grow. And I'm kind of convinced there's something about like pressure, osmotic pressure, and something with a mycorrhizae. That's why I don't clean off my OSHA. I will take it from the dirt and I'll lay it someplace and just shake it off lightly. But I do want that fungal component of whatever is happening to also be there on the outside of the root, because I'm like, in my mind, I know that this is doing something with the plant in the way that it's bringing its medicine. And OSHA is really good for respiratory or really endurance. So if you've seen people do like the long tribal runs, or if they had to like, hop down into Denver or something, that was an easy trek on foot or even on horse. And so when they started feeling kind of fatigued, they would take a little bit of this that was like macerated or was softened with something, chew on it, put it under their tongue, and you can breathe a lot better. And it's something that I've used a lot in the last 3 years. And I've like distributed a lot of medicine for people dealing with long COVID, COPD, or honestly, Denver's nasty. So dealing with the effects of Suncor and just kind of like our air here. I just did a health fair for Servicios de la Raza, and I batched a bunch of OSHA honey for folks. And yeah, spot on. We're dealing with like people were being honest enough about how messed up a lot of people and their families were with breathing issues coming after 2020. So I don't clean, like I said, my stuff because I know my sources. Stuff is not touching the ground, and we're going through and we're picking to make sure there's no bugs and just kind of like taking our time with the plant after we introduce it and taking care with how it's there. Does that help answer that question? Okay. So my carrier oil, in this case, I said I have a Mediterranean flower. It does come from Europe, and I'm going to add that in because my lineage, it is not necessarily intentionally European. I do have a blood line or a blue line on my ancestry just because there's a lot of raping going on and a lot of non-consent, right? So I know that my husband is white, and that is like the only European lineage that was actually welcomed in my bloodline. So it's weird when I work with European plants, even if they are here in Denver, because this is not where I come from, and I have to approach it a little bit differently as I'm starting to work with it. It's just something that I have. Same thing with linden. Linden is also one of those European plants that's pervasive here. It's fantastic, but it is a different reckoning on how I work with it. So anyway, Mediterranean herb, Mediterranean oil, glug, 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 glug. And I'm just going to get this, just let this go. If I was doing the fresh plant, the way that I would cover it would be I would use a ring like this. I put a paper towel in the center. That way the moisture from the flower could then, rise up out of the paper towel. I do that with dandelion when I pick the head like fresh for castor oil too. But this one has been drying probably about like 2 weeks now, and it's been so hot, and we have had a lot of airflow going through the studio here. So letting it glug glug, you can see like it's kind of bubbling a little bit with that air escaping, and I agitate, trying to get out as much air as I possibly can. And just really letting these flower heads, and I'm specific about flower heads, not just the petals, getting coated and saturated here. Like I said, I'm not measuring this one because I'm not putting it on a product for the public. I'm doing this for my husband. And yeah, I do the whole, may this help him, may this help his inflammation, may this help his mental state, his physical state, his emotional state. May this bring him the care that I have for him and the care that I've had for the land and the garden that I've been taking care of. And thank you so much. And I hope I've been giving you a home and a good home to all your babies. And boom, we're ready to go. So kind of think about I'm using a carrier oil of olive oil. And the way our kitchens are set up, what happens when you keep your oil too close to the stove in your kitchen? what happens to it with that heat? Does it stay fresh? Or does it start to go rancid? There we go, right. So the same thing with the oils that we're using here too. And this is like one of those funky ones. I don't know exactly who's in this audience right now, so I'm just really trying to temper myself. But like, it's always interesting to me when non-Black people like adopt or are taking care of diaspora babies. And it's something that's happened a few times. They've like asked me like, oh, what can I do? Because, you know, the hair smells funky. And it's just like, why does the hair smell funky? And a lot of times it's people not getting the best products for somebody's hair. We need a lot of moisture in our hair. Well, people that have a lot more texture than me need a lot of moisture in the hair. So some people will just kind of get whatever products, and they do. They smell kind of funky because the oils have been around for a while. They've been processed in a way, they've been left out somewhere or whatever. When we're dealing with fresher oils, they don't smell rancid, and they're actually going to be better for how, you know, we're using them on our body. So the same thing with like hair care products, the oil we have in our stove. This, I'm not going to put it out in the window and cook the oil and let it get all gross. I'll probably put it like over here out of the way. I do have some stuff going over there that's shaded, or I'll put it underneath so there's no direct sunlight, or I'll put it in one of my storage kind of like percolation sort of like rooms that I have in the back there. So that is simple right there. That right there is going to give me my calendula oil. And then let's see, we're coming up on some cycles right now. We're going to have our full moon coming up like in about a week. So I'm a little bit off from the moon cycle right now. So I wouldn't necessarily like have done this. I'm one of those weirdos that does do it by the moon cycle. So I'm a little off. So I might go for maybe about a cycle and a half with this, or I might just kind of wait until the full moon around my birthday. And like I said, this is for my partner. So what am I going to do with this oil? I can do so much with it. I don't know if any of you put olive oil directly onto your skin. I can just like little bits of it. I can just rub it on. I can keep the flowers in there if I'm doing it, especially if they're super dry, and just kind of like what I do with my vanilla extract. I just keep a bean in there and I put in like bourbon, or I put in vodka, and I just like keep on making more vanilla extract while I keep that in there. I can do the same thing with this. Or else when it's like, okay, it is time for it to go because these flowers are looking funky, I'm not getting anything else out of them, then I'll just get a piece of cheesecloth. We're going to get to that in a moment for digestion. But I take this one internally for digestion. I probably wouldn't, because I don't know if the fat from the oil will affect what's happening with the digestion. I would go directly towards the flour, and then that's when you can start using it in teas. And you can actually start baking it into stuff as well. So this is going to be topical. I'm going to keep this topical just because if somebody has something going on funky with their GI, or if it's going to their gallbladder. What really messes around with gallbladders? Fats. This is pure fat here that we're trying to absorb this in. So I would not use this for digestion, just in case it does kind of go into that whole complex. So this is strictly topical. I would then open this up, cut a sieve. I use a tea towel like over my strainer, and then I would just glug, 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 pour this over into my strainer. I do have my strainer here. I'm looking around to see what tools that we have. This is my favorite strainer, right? It's kind of big. It's a big opening. It fits on a lot of bowls. I put a tea towel over it, pour everything in slowly so it's going directly into the bowl underneath, and then just kind of let it go. I might agitate it a little bit, just like this, a little bouncing. And then I'll get the towel, get the four corners, bring it up, and basically start twisting the top so it's almost like a compress. So I'm squeezing everything out. Now you want to go slow with that process, just because this does get super goopy. And if you're just kind of making a mess in your hands all over it, you're losing a lot of the medicine on your hand. So you want to take your time with that. Another way of extracting that goes into this book, and yeah, I don't really have time for that, is I don't buy a lot of kitchen gadgets, okay? You have to know this about me. My mentor talked me into a Vitamix, and I love this particular Vitamix, and I got this special one specifically for calendula salves because it has the hot soup function on it. So you can look up Vitamix and you can see the hot soup function. And does it keep everything up so the whole machine is just like a hot plate? No. Is it just because of how fast everything is spinning that's generating heat? Yes. And it does make soups, but it also heats up your salves if you're not trying to wait this long to like naturally let it go. I could just go ahead heat it up, have the salve going, have everything going, and just like let that thing run for, depending on my batch, I can just like run it for like 20 minutes. Yeah, does your Vitamix, comment about having a Vitamix, does your Vitamix have the hot soup function on it? And you can also message me so I can send you the recipe from this book if you want to make the salve with the Vitamix. But it has dials. It has to specifically say hot soup on it. And I know when my mentor is kind of like, she showed me this, I'm just like, man, I never wanted to buy one of those things. I thought they were so gimmicky. It is so functional for this. And I think that was when I actually did use Black Friday. Like I had this one Black Friday where I got like new wellies for my garden. I got a Vitamix for herbs. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use Black Friday to like disrupt the system and like be healthy for people. So yeah, you can do everything in the Vitamix, let it go for like 20, 30 minutes. And it's the same thing. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to put my tea towel on top of it, put it over a bowl, let it go for a bit, and then twist it. And then when I have in the bowl, I'll want like a pitcher funnel on it. And that's when I pour it into my little salve trays or however I'm going to give them to people. And this is where you see stuff like this, or you see the ones that look like lip balm containers. And, you know, it seems kind of kish what people do it for lip balm. It is actually really kind and powerful medicine to give to folks, just because it does so much what I explained at the beginning there. There you go. Yeah. If you can make soup with it that heats it up though, that's the whole thing. And I'd rather go this method than using the stovetop because it is such a gentle heat that goes. We don't want to denature what's happening here. And we're not really talking about cooking stuff or making syrups right now. But that's one thing you do want to keep in mind when you're cooking your food and you're cooking your food as medicine and you're cooking your medicine. It's just the energetics of heat. Because like, you know, you think of rice, you start rice off with an awesome boil, boom, okay, there's the rice, and then we turn it all the way down as the rice is absorbing, or else what are you gonna do? You're gonna burn your rice. So it's kind of like the same thing with our medicines, really hard roots that we have to chop up, and we just can't get through, but we wanna use that really thick, hard root. We wanna chop it up, and we really wanna get a violent boil going. And I'm going to use that terminology, violent, the way it's going after those cells and it's trying to get that medicine out. Something like this, these are beautiful, delicate petals that are now getting all crazy with how they're becoming seeds. And they're just like, what's happening with this atmosphere changing so quickly? This is something very gentle here. So you don't want to use violent heat, very gentle heat, getting things going so that the plant can be regulated and really kind of give the medicine that you want it to get. So yeah, going back to this one, I'm going to probably, like I said, go maybe 4 or 5 weeks with this. I'm going to strain it out, and then I'm just going to have essentially a darker oil than what I had with the olive oil I originally did. And with that, I can just put it into its own jar so that somebody can just use that oil directly on the skin if you see people using olive oil, or that's where I start playing with my concoctions, mixing it in with beeswax pellets if I really want to make it firm, and those are the salves. Or if I just want to have a beautiful cream, that's when I start mixing it with the coconut oil, the shea butter, the cocoa butter. I can put in some vitamin E with it. You can really start playing with your formulas. You can even put in essential oil. That's your choice. You know, essential oils do have different properties. So when I work with the teens, I go specifically for orange and rosemary because it's very gentle and it's also good for mental clarity. And I feel like teenagers are just so that those are the two that I give them, but in very limited quantity, so it doesn't like burn their skin or anything. And some of those oils, they can actually burn a little bit, like if you get to eucalyptus and clove. Lavender is actually good if you have a burn in the kitchen, you can put that oil on you. I get really cautious with lavender though, because if people like have issues with like their mom, they're unresolved, or issues with the divine feminine within themselves, being around a lot of lavender can actually not be calming. It can be like very nerve-wracking because that reckoning hasn't happened. So I'm always really cautious with lavender, and especially with people, the global majority, just because of, you know, the way we've landed here. Right. So just heads up on that if you're doing any essential oils. So with that, I would make my concoction, have my oil. For my partner loves shea butter. Yeah. Like white boy loves shea butter. So I do a little bit of shea, I do a little coconut, I'll mix this in. Now, if I want to make it whipped, it's so easy. If you have one of those immersion blenders, that one that goes like that, I will have my container and I'll just use my 2-cup Pyrex, mix these things in and just bring them up and down as I'm introducing air, get a spatula, put it into like almost a container like this. I'll do a white container so no light's getting in. But notice how this one even is amber, so that light's not getting in to kind of denature what's happening there with that plant fat. And then, yeah, I hand that off and my partner's just like, thank you so much. If the skin is really over the top and, you know, calendula is not doing it on its own, you can start adding in other things like blue chamomile extract is fantastic for people with eczema. But just start with this. Start with the simple stuff first, especially if you're growing it, it's in your garden, and they're so pervasive in our gardens right now. Like, you put a lot of love into this. You put a lot of care into it. I'm imagining if you're working with Sister Rote, you talk to the plant a lot. Like, you know, I mean, what else are you going to do there? Be like, hey, calendula, what's up? So the plant is going to serve you if you've been serving it pretty well. So that is as far as I'm going to go for topical. Are there any questions about
I have a question.
Mhm.
I am allergic to grape seed oil. So do you have a recommendation for another light oil that I could use as a carrier?
that? Safflower?
Which one?
Safflower.
Safflower. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and then with that, once again, get it food grade. Get it food grade straight up. Don't get anything toasted. Toasted's just going to have you smelling funky. So food grade, organic, if you can, because we all know the difference there with that certification. So once again, these things are going on to the delicate parts of our bodies. It is not going to be like 50% going into our bloodstream, but some of it still goes into our bloodstream. And that whole thing about this gentle flower, you grew it, mixing with these things, putting in the intention. Like, and you know, you don't have to say prayer. Like, I have no idea how people are with prayer and religion and faith and that kind of stuff. It can just be as simple as intention. And that is you. That is you from like soil to bottle, like with your self-care and how you're preserving and using these plants throughout the year. And it's also really fun because, you know, as we get into winter, you still have this, and it's like, oh yeah, do you remember when it was warm and that year it rained a lot and it was super hot? Like, you have those memories. So I'm going to go into internal use now. You can eat calendula flowers. So one of the things that I can do with this, and I love doing with my flowers, I love cooking with them. I love putting them in salads. Putting this one in a salad, I would just take off the individual flowers that look like the petals and I sprinkle them around. Not healthy necessarily, but I love putting them into cookies as well. That's how I get my kids to pick dandelions at some point of the year. If I'm not using for something, it's like, hey, go pick up the dandelion heads. And we take off all those little rays or those individual flowers, and I'll make them dandelion cookies. It works like a charm. Same thing with your calendula. Just that calendula has so much medicine. I'm like, you know, less ready to just make a massive batches of calendula cookies. But you can put it in there, and like my sister-in-law, she has a birthday coming up, and I have a special section in my garden for like pansies and nasturtiums and that kind of stuff. And I do make her cookies, and I press the flowers on the top, and then I put a little castor sugar on it. And yeah, I love making cookies for people like that. So that's one way to take it. Another way is as simple as teas. You know, you can do your whole tea blend. I get hesitant about doing only calendula though. So it's why you want to take the calendula as the big one. I currently have a friend that has a lot of GI stuff going on, and there's been like some esophageal like deterioration because of acid reflux. So she's a little nervous about like, you know, what's going on and what you can take and what you can eat, just because she knows that like this acid is kind of like getting this part of her GI tract. So yeah, we've been putting together a little blend for her of marshmallow root and calendula, just because the oils in this, even, I don't know if they're going to upset her stomach. So that one is kind of like, I do like a 1 to 8 blend of marshmallow towards the calendula. And that's another way to do it. So you can just straight up do like, take these and just take them off. And hopefully that's small enough. And if it's not small enough, then you can even like chop this up even later. So just a couple ideas of how to use it. And I'm kind of curious if folks here are already using calendula as medicine or what you're playing with. Yeah, because this is communal learning, right? I want to know what you're doing with it. And I did. I left 10 minutes of Q&A. I told you there was like a lot of talking on this one.
trying to let them ask questions, but I'm always going to have a question.
Oh, and I'm going to throw out one request, just because it is so interesting where I mentioned plants and plants not coming from my own ancestral homes. So like marigolds are very significant to me. I use them in a lot of stuff, but the Pennymans who do Soul Fire Farm, I saw them with you, Sister Otay,
Yes.
at that conference last year. And my question was, I see so many convergences with the use of marigolds. How are marigolds used in Africa? Because I know there has to be some connection with the African diaspora. And so that is one that I still have not answered, but I know if you use them in South Asia and you use them in Mexico, like they could not have missed Africa. So if anybody ever figured that one out, please let me know, because I do believe that there is some beautiful connection there that we're just not, that was removed from our timelines. All right, questions.
Couple of questions. So, and it's more general, not necessarily about calendula, but first and foremost, like you were talking about contraindications, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering if there are, so with like, pharmaceutical medicine and stuff like that, if somebody's like taking blood pressure medicine or whatever the case may be, would you need to like, is it a both and, like, can you be doing the herbal pieces as well as the pharmaceutical pieces? Or is it better to just be like in one or the other? Is it both and or either or?
It depends on the severity of what somebody's dealing with their medications. And that is a good one, like just to clear it with your physician. A lot of physicians, like, people are kind of realizing the practicality of people having like exposure to these plants now. So it seems like a lot more physicians are open to things. And having that GARD, or generally is regarded as safe, GRAS, that's what it is, generally regarded as safe. Most physicians are usually like, cool, yeah, do it, live your best life. And even like when you start getting to hawthorn, a lot of physicians are still like, go ahead and do the hawthorn, because that's a plant that we do have around here that we can do something with. And you find components of it in a lot of cardiovascular medication, and it's generally regarded as safe. So yeah, talk to your physician, because you might be surprised like how they're coming around from like, their different societies and their different conferences. And it's like, why aren't we having people complementing this medicine? So I generally hear more folks saying yes, especially with the GRAS designations.
Okay. And another a follow-up question. So how do you integrate this into your daily practices? Like just basically, I've seen her going, oh my gosh, so you got to put it in a bottle, you have to collect it, put it in a bottle, where, there's just so much in there. And it's like, what would you say would be some tips to kind of like integrate this kind of practice more and more in your life without going crazy?
Okay, so integrating herbalism and working with plants in your life, I just did a hydration lab yesterday, and that is 100% what it was about. It was the easiest entry. And right now, 2023, there's a lot of anxiety, right? Teas and infusions. So the number one tea that I had folks taking yesterday is oat straw tea. If you can have oatmeal, you can have oat straw tea. They sell it in bulk at natural grocers for $2.99 a bag. And it's a lot of bioavailable magnesium. So if you go out and you see everybody with those giant canisters of natural calm for $20, this tea is $2.99, and it lasts you for such a long time. So that's like, if you have a healthy baseline and you're like, how do I use herbs for XYZ that you're trying to deal with? But you're overall like, yeah, if you're not taking your women's vitamins or you're just peeing out the minerals and everything, teas is the best way to go. And assuming we have a lot of women here or femme bodies, easy tea, 1 part oat straw, 1 part nettle. You're getting magnesium, calcium, and iron. And you steep that up, and you can even go lighter on the iron if it does start making you constipated. The magnesium should offset that. You do 1/4 cup of that in a quart of water. You can do cold at night, let it infuse straight in the morning, or you can just let it go 15 minutes, and then you have a quart of tea. Just drink that through the day and kind of see if you're like, whoa, it should be like one of the resiliency makers, because you're getting calcium, iron, and magnesium. So that's the easiest way to incorporate things, is with teas. With the calendula, the easiest way, dry it, put it in oil, strain it out, go a moon cycle, strain it out. And then you can start off as easy as just putting the oil on your skin. Or if somebody has a burn, or if you want to be super extra and awesome, like, you know, make one of these lotions, make a salve, and then gift it to people, because this does become wound medicine. This does all those things we mentioned in the beginning. Topically, this one does so much. It's a true power hitter for folks. And it grows here and it's very gentle.